Good morning. It is Wednesday, November 1st. Already November. We're here for our regular scheduled commissioner meeting. We have all three commissioners present. We have our administrator and our clerk of the board. And this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. All right, the first items on the agenda is approval of the vouchers. I believe we have two today.
Mr. Chairman, question on the agenda.
Go ahead, Commissioner Peck.
I note that there are three items under regular business today labeled A, B, and C. There were no read-ahead materials for any of these items, and my question is, are these intended as discussion items or action items today?
Both.
Okay, then I would move that the agenda be amended to remove items A, B, and C under regular business on the basis that adequate notice has not been provided to members of this board. There's been no discussion, and there are numerous employees and elected officials who are directly impacted whose voice has been silenced by this approach. That's my motion.
There are no elected officials. The only ones impacted by these three items are the commissioners themselves. Commissioners are making a decision on the commissioners. And Mr. Gonzalez, you want to weigh in here?
Mr. Chairman, point of order. It's not appropriate for the county administrator to be weighing in on discussions when there's a motion on the table. I disagree with you on the premise that only these three commissioners would be impacted by this change. And when we get to discussion, I think that'll become apparent. But the motion remains.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for no second.
Thank you.
We'll continue on here. There are two vouchers, I believe.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $843,201.99 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,201,046.58 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I believe there is a third one, correct?
We have a voucher for the purchase of the Davidson building. Move for approval of the a voucher for the amount of $1,102,741.95 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the purchase of the Davidson building out of the ARPA funds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That moves us down to the proclamation National Adoption Day. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. I'll read this. This is National Adoption Day proclamation by the Board of Commissioners of Franklin County, Washington, whereas the County of Franklin County recognizes the importance of giving children permanent, safe, and loving families through adoption, and whereas National Adoption Day is a collective national effort to raise awareness of more than 110,000 children in foster care waiting for permanent and loving families. And whereas to help these children find permanent, nurturing families, the Benton and Franklin County Superior Court will open its doors on National Adoption Day, Friday, November 17th, 2023, to finalize the adoptions of local children and join other organizations to celebrate all adoptions. And whereas this effort, along with similar celebrations in all 50 states around the country, will offer children the chance to live with stable and loving families and encourage other dedicated individuals to make a powerful difference in the lives of a child through adoption. Now, therefore, Clint Didier, the chairman of the Franklin County Commissioners, by virtue of the authority vested in him, do hereby proclaim November 17th, 2023 as National Adoption Day.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
You're welcome.
Well done. All right. With that, we'll move down to public comment. Anybody for public comment?
Commissioners, while you busy yourself arguing or kibitzing about medical savings accounts or VEBAs of your employees, I want to take a few minutes to tell you where some of Franklin County's tax dollars are going this year, in particular in the arena of courts. So did you know that you will be sending Franklin County taxpayer dollars over to Benton County in the following manner to handle portions of our court systems? Monies that benefit Benton County residents, not Franklin County residents, or at a minimum doesn't allow the people of Franklin County to decide what's best for them. Benton County, to administrate paper clips, those type of issues, just the department, we're sending $248,842 to Benton County to manage Franklin County's money. We also are sending $1.7 million to Benton County to administrate our portions of the Superior Court systems. We also are sending to Benton County to administer drug courts for Franklin County $109,313. If you take these numbers, and these are just estimates, that's $2.5 million that we're just sending over to Benton County without any input or say. All without giving any consideration to what's best for the people of Franklin County. I'm sure that I've mentioned to you recently that our mental health tax dollars are somewhere north of $11 million and climbing, and we've done nothing with that money. Did you know that Franklin County was awarded opioid monies to the tune of north of $175,000? And that money was basically passed through Greater Columbia Behavioral Mental Health, who passed it to Benton County. And then Benton County, Kyle Sullivan, then took the money and divided it out into the district courts, money that was meant for this county to address opioid issues, money that our coroner's office and our district court could have utilized. I think we ought to get the $170-some thousand back and use it for what's best for the people of Franklin County, not for the Benton County District Courts.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone? Nobody on the phone? Nobody coming to the mic? Moves us down. Oh, we do have a caller. Anybody else for public comment?
You have 3 minutes?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you sound very far away. So this is LaWanda Hatch. I am just calling about something that I was concerned about at the end of last week's meeting. And that was when Chairman Didier had said that the assessor's office refused to hear his son's appeal. And I am concerned because I'm just wondering, does anybody read the Constitution? Just because someone is related to someone that it holds public office doesn't mean their First Amendment rights disappear. And under the First Amendment, as you know, every citizen is allowed to redress their grievances to their government. Commissioner Didier has no say over what the assessor's office does. What his being commissioner has nothing to do with his son appealing and having heard the ridiculous amount that he's being taxed on when he just bought it at almost half the price of what they are now assessing it just a few months ago. And so he has cause to bring that grievance to his government. Believe me, if Commissioner Didier had a say over our property taxes, all of our property taxes would be much less than they are. So I'm just, this is really for the assessor's office. I ask that they all learn and read not only the Washington State Constitution, which actually guarantees life, liberty, and property. I hope that they will take the time to study and learn the United States Constitution and all of its amendments and understand the separation of government. Just as Commissioner Mullen's brother was able to come to the county commissioners, all Commissioner Mullen had to do was to not vote. And since Commissioner Didier has no say over what the assessor has, how he assesses property, really means that it was a ridiculous statement. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
So, Commissioners, John Rosenau, County Assessor, I actually think I need to address that because the Assessor's Office does not hear the appeals. The Assessor's Office has nothing to do with the appeals. In fact, the appeals are done by the board, the BOE. And the BOE, the board, is appointed by the commissioners of this county. They're the only ones that can recuse themselves or hear a case or decide on a case unless it goes up to the state BTA. There is a statute that prohibits the board members from hearing a case of a commissioner, their blood relation, or a marital relation. And that is not the assessor's office. We assess all properties the same. That is a BOE matter. So, Commissioners, if you don't like what the BOE is doing, it is within your power to deal with the BOE, not within mine or my office. So hopefully that'll answer Ms. Hatch's remarks.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody else on the phone? Moves us down to the consent agenda. I believe there are 6 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 6 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for the 6 consent items. With no discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to regular business items. Modifying current VEBA elected official voting group. Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes, Chair, I've been working with Jeff Briggs on this, just looking at different options of forming this particular group for commissioners themselves. I know Commissioner Peck had some questions about whether it was noticed correctly. I'll ask Jeff Briggs to come forward to answer any of those questions. I believe they were noticed well beyond 24 hours, so any other context can open it up for questions to Jeff.
Okay, so just sort of an overview. We had some direction to take a look and seek to modify the voting blocks, for lack of a better term, of the elected officials. So basically splitting off the Board of County Commissioners from the other elected officials.
Excuse me, Mr. Briggs. Hate to interrupt right up front, but you just said we have direction to take this action.
Right.
For the record, where'd that direction come from?
It came from the chair.
Okay, not
Okay.
from this board, but from the chair.
Right, and
Thank
so
you.
that's why we're here today, is to, because in order to actually take action on this, we would need board approval.
Right.
Right.
so-
Well, we're big on transparency in this county, and so I just wanted to be transparent about who or what is driving this. Because there were no read-ahead materials, no advance notice of this, it
Right.
doesn't give me the benefit of knowing the discussions that you've had with the chair or with Mr. Gonzalez or
Right.
anyone else. So having been put at that information disadvantage, it's going to be necessary for me to get clarity on a few things.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, and I'll give you some more background, Commissioner Peck.
Great, thanks.
So we did reach out to Rich Dickman, our VIBA coordinator, works with Gallagher Bassett. And so really, this is more of a contractual issue as well as one is getting authority from the board, because under our contract with Gallagher, who administrates our VIBA benefits, we want to, it's not really pre-approval. They're never going to say, because their lawyers would never let them say this, that whatever we're proposing meets the IRS code. But what they will do is say that it appears that it meets IRS code. And so any changes, they require under the agreement that we sort of run that by them. So we would need some direction from the board. We run that by them, our proposal, and then they would let us know, hey, this looks okay. If it looks okay, we come back to the board with a formal resolution that would create this new group and go from there. And so in terms of the groups, the direction that we received is that we would be splitting off the board from the regular elected officials and not changing those other elected officials' benefits in any way. The only modification to that group would be that they no longer have the Board of County Commissioners as part of the elected officials group. They would create a new group, which is common, I think, for elected officials because of the constitutional limitations that certainly have been in the news lately, and we've discussed at prior meetings. So the real direction we need is not whether we want to create another, we would need approval to create another voting block. The devil's in the details. The big question that comes up next is, okay, we create the board as a separate voting block. What do we want those benefits to be? That's what they're going to want to know. How are we funding that? Are we going to have the traditional way that we have with every other county employee, which is a lump sum that goes in, and any excess?
Excuse me, Mr. Briggs. We have numerous county employees, not just elected officials, who take the cash stipend. So don't say every other employee.
Correct, yeah.
You said the traditional way that every other employee takes it, and that's a misstatement.
Oh, right. I wasn't talking about the cash conversions there. What I was talking about was the lump sum. So everyone receives a lump sum payment. Some take that as a cash conversion, others do not just the board, as Commissioner Peck points out. But do we want to keep it that way? That's the big question, because they're going to want to know that. I want to know that, because I don't know what I'm proposing to them. So we have sort of three paths we can take here. We can, and this is the one that we would recommend that my office would. It's the most risk averse. You're always going to get that from my office, is we keep the board's benefits.
Excuse me
same.
once again, but this is going to be necessary because I wasn't provided any advanced materials. You're saying that your office is recommending this action?
If the board is inclined to
Go this
create
way,
it,
you'd recommend
right,
this path, okay.
then we would recommend not changing anything or making any changes to contribution amounts effective as of the date of the new term of the elected official, so as to avoid any sort of constitutional issues, not necessarily IRS tax issues, but constitutional ones. The
So,
second,
thank you for clarifying, just to be sure I understand. You're saying that your office recommends this procedure if, in fact, it's the board's desire to make these changes.
correct.
Right, thank you.
Correct. We're not taking a position on whether or not we think it's a good idea to break off the board, but if it chooses to do so, not to alter those benefits during the term. The other alternative would be, and would be to eliminate the cash conversions as to the board, not to any other officials who currently have a cash conversion, but to leave the contribution amount the same. So whatever that amount is, and the crucial factor here is that we keep that the same, not as every county employee, because as we all know, some are different, some are subject to CBAs, but a good measuring stick would be other non-BARG positions. So I believe all of them receive the same sort of lump sum, whether they convert that to cash or have it as a VEBA benefit that goes into their integrated HRA plan. We would want to, as a second alternative, leave that amount the same if we eliminate the cash conversions. Of course, the third option would be to alter that, which we do not recommend, but again, we are here to obtain direction from the board.
Thank you. Any more questions?
So the VEBA elected official voting group was created by a vote of all of the Franklin County elected officials. There was a meeting held, a discussion, and the vote took place in this room. And the majority voted to go with the cash stipend. And because we're required to make these decisions and execute them as a block, that's what was done. I understand that today's effort is intended to split off a portion of that elected group. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, the other elected officials are potentially impacted by this decision, and to my knowledge have not been noticed that this discussion was happening, haven't been invited to this meeting to participate in this discussion. And because we repeatedly pride ourselves on being so transparent and taking care of our employees, I'm concerned that they've not been included in this discussion. The reduction of 3 members from that group likely changes the voting balance. I don't know which direction it might go. There's been a lot of discussion. There's been some time and experience that has happened. But certainly their voice in this is very important. Concerned that that's been left out. Appreciate you noting that some of these dynamics, while we might change the structure, the effective dates fit at various points on the calendar based on term lengths and other issues. And then I'll just go ahead and speak to the elephant in the room, which is the majority of this board has frequently, publicly, loudly, in print and otherwise, contended that the taxable fringe benefit is salary. If it is, and we take an action that any way impacts any of other electeds, especially if it has the effect of a downward effect on their quote-unquote salary, then we have problems there. But I think we'll wait and get into more detail on that as we go through the other steps and see what happens. It may or may not be necessary to have that conversation. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Mr. Briggs, when they had this meeting with all these electeds, were all the electeds present?
Gosh, I don't know. That was before my time. I did review the original resolution that adopted the HRA VEBA. I was not aware that it was passed by the elected officials. I know that the board passed the resolution, and I don't know, it didn't indicate in any of the whereas clauses that there was a vote by all the elected officials, but that could have been the case. I'm not aware of that being a requirement, given that the board is the legislative body and the body responsible for contracting on behalf of the county, and certainly employment benefits. There's an employment contract there. This is a contract issue, so it would be within the purview of the board. But it's certainly something I can look into further to determine if that is a requirement or if it's something that the board effectively delegated its contracting authority to all elected officials to operate as a voting group.
And I think that's why we're here today, is because if we did delegate that, we want to pull it back.
Okay.
So, Mr. Briggs,
And
while
we weren't elected when it was delegated.
when the chair says, if that's the case, we want to pull it back, obviously he's speaking for himself. He doesn't speak for
Yes.
this Board of Commissioners. The meeting did take place, it took place right here in this room, and all the electeds were invited. And to my recollection, most, if not all, attended in person, and those that did not attend in person submitted their votes remotely. Whether or not there is a statutory or other obligation to go through that process was not my point. My point is that we repeatedly pound the table about how transparent we are, and yet we're contemplating taking an action that has the potential to significantly impact a number of employees, including our electeds. We've not provided any read-ahead material. We've not noticed those elected officials. We haven't acknowledged that decision was made by them in a vote. Not debating the statutory piece of it, because I haven't looked it up to see, like you, whether or not it's a mandated step. But it does seem a disservice to our elected officials not to have given them a heads up on this, and not to give them the opportunity to vote their choice again. But we'll leave that there. Thanks.
I'll make the motion that county administrator and the PA's office to create a resolution and policy to create a separate Franklin County Commissioner VIBA group.
I second. There's been a motion and a second. Mr. Briggs?
And so it sounds like that's the only change then? We're not going to implement any other changes? Like the funding element of it would ostensibly remain the same? Just want to make sure that's,
No, we're just
Okay.
creating a separate group.
okay, great.
The three commissioners. So there's been a motion and a second
Discussion.
to create, for the Franklin County Administrator and the PA's office, to create a resolution and policy to create a separate Franklin County Commissioner VIBA group. Discussion.
Will the other electeds have an opportunity to comment or contribute to the resolution?
This has no effect on the other elected officials. It's just the three commissioners. We're creating our own group.
I understand the intent of the action. The question is whether or not the other electeds are going to be allowed to voice on this. And I'll just offer that if you're an elected official and you want to weigh in on this, because it has the potential to impact your voice on how the remaining electeds take their benefits, then I would encourage you to coordinate with the county administrator's office and/or Mr. Briggs.
All right, if there's no more discussion, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
All right, moves us down to the creation of the Franklin County Commissioner VIBA voting group, which would be the three commissioners.
If I may, Chair,
Yes.
I think these are all kind of different sides of the same coin, not that we have a three-sided coin here, but what we're doing is we're removing the commissioners, so that would modify the elected officials group and then creating a new group. So I think we've already
Done that.
taken care of that item as well.
Okay.
Mr. Briggs, I'd like to go down that well a little deeper with you.
Oh, sure.
You have effectively, the board has effectively separated out the three, modifying the VIBA elected official voting group. I believe the intent there was to separate off the three commissioners,
That's correct.
and I don't recall the specific words of the motion. Did it effectively do that in your judgment?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so we have effectively created the separate Franklin County Commissioner VIBA voting group.
Well,
We've separated them out. Thank you. We've separated them out. We haven't determined what their status is, right?
right, we have direction to go, and we need to come back with a resolution to do that. We wouldn't want to do that by motion. So the motion would be then for us to go, we need to verify with Gallagher Bassett that everything looks okay, and then we'll come back with a resolution.
And by okay, you mean that it's okay to create a three-member VIBA voting group?
Right, under the IRS rules, that's the only thing they look at,
I understand.
right?
Yeah, but you'd be looking for their input. We're all aware that the rules and VIBA contracts typically prohibit individuals from being a separate VIBA group, right?
Right.
And my research shows that it's unclear as to whether or not there is a threshold as to how many people you have to be in a group. Are you aware of anything that legally that bears on that question of how many people are required?
Absolutely. Yes, the main thing you want to avoid is to have a highly compensated group, which we haven't determined yet whether the board is. It's defined as any employee who's the top 25% of the income. So it may be that the board is considered highly compensated individuals. We're just assuming that for the sake of being cautious here. And what you can't do with a highly compensated group is provide them a better benefit than any other employees that are similarly situated. So anyone subject to a CBA, that's a whole different animal. We don't worry about that. And that's why I said earlier that we want to be comparing this to the non-BARGs and making sure that whatever benefit we come up with isn't better than the non-BARGs. Right. We could give or the board could give themselves a lesser benefit, but we want to be real cautious that we're not giving a greater benefit than the existing non-BARGs.
Certainly. In fact, that was part of the calculus in the county establishing exactly an equal amount for each and every employee when the current system was put into place to ensure that we didn't have that sort of disparity. And there's other reasons that we wanted to avoid disparity as well, discrimination against various groups based on marital status, et cetera. So that is interesting and revalidates what I think I already understood. The question, though, is are you aware of any threshold for the number of members of a VIBA group, not their income status?
I don't believe there's a limitation on the number. And
Well,
my
there is a limitation. You can't have one, right?
that would be odd to have one.
Yeah, one you can't have, because we've had this discussion before about how that violates the VIBA contract. You yourself are the one that told me that about 3 weeks ago, that you can't have a single member VIBA group.
Chair,
and we
permission
can
to
have,
speak when I have the opportunity.
and we can have large numbers, dozens, right? My question is whether or not there's a threshold in between there. Are we allowed to have one of 2, of 3, of 10? You know, where is that cutoff, or is there a cutoff? How do we decide that?
I don't believe so. It's common in speaking with our administrator, our HRA VIBA administrator, to cut off the board. He says it's common in a lot of agencies because of those sort of constitutional considerations we have with an employee that sets their own salary and benefits. And so that's usually a reason why they'll do it. But aside from that, I'm not aware of a limitation on having a 3-member voting group.
Okay, thank you.
The chair recognizes Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to lean on John Rosenau a bit. I believe that they have a really small group in the assessor's office that converts their VIBA to cash, which is a 3-member group. So if we're talking
6 members, and that was under union negotiation.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify. I know you can have smaller groups, and I think sheriff's support staff has a semi-small staff too. What, like 7 individuals that? But they're part of a union also, right? Okay, but that's definitely something that we could look into in terms of the number and sizes.
So we've created this group. Is there any further action we need to do today, Mr. Briggs?
Well, yes, well, not today, but Mr. Gonzalez and I need to get together with the HRA VIBA administrator and submit the application and policy based on the direction we have, and then we need to come back with a resolution.
Okay.
and adopt that to formally create the group.
Okay.
The action taken today was direction. It was not approval of a change. That'll happen if and when a resolution is provided and approved.
Correct. I would
Okay.
not advise changing it today because I think that might be a breach of our agreement.
Okay. Thank you. So that takes us down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Nobody on the phone? Nobody coming forward for public comment? Commissioner Administrator updates, Mr. Gonzalez.
Chair, keeping busy. Been having a lot of conversations with the new GM over at the HAPO Center and HWL, our new management team. That's kept me really busy. Obviously, we're in the midst of budget season, and so a lot of moving parts right now. So really too many to put into one report, but definitely looking forward and planning towards the new year. So keeping our goals in mind and just continuing to move forward.
So I noticed an email about the basketball court. Are they still pursuing some funds to repair a court that I looked at? I didn't see nothing wrong with.
Yeah, and that's something I don't necessarily want to discuss that in public because
Okay.
we've got some issues that are going on there.
Okay.
So, but yeah, we can address that.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I definitely don't want at this point.
Okay. Takes us down to Mr. Peck.
Yeah, I'm taken aback by the previous comment that we don't want to discuss what's happening at the HAPO Center publicly. Is there some litigation or potential or pending litigation?
There could be, so
Okay,
I
all
don't
right.
necessarily want to discuss that.
All right, well,
in
that's
public,
reasonable
so-
if you think that there's pending litigation or potential for it. If so, I'd ask that we have an executive session today so that I can get up to speed on that topic.
Did everybody receive those emails?
Everybody did, so
Okay.
yeah.
Just,
Yeah. Information that's in an email to the county is a public record, so it's already public information. I'm interested if there's information beyond those that we can't talk about here, because we've already talked about them publicly in emails.
I think so. We are going to have an executive session on that
Okay.
today. So just, yeah,
okay.
there's,
Thank
so we'll have that opportunity to discuss it.
Okay, so County Road Administration Board met last week for 3 days. Just as a quick reminder, this is a state board appointed by the governor's office and various agencies. There's, I think, 5 or 6 commissioners statewide and about an equal number of engineers. We oversee the public works functions in all the counties to ensure their compliance with statutes, which is an essential step in keeping the county eligible for federal, state, and other road monies, and also oversees and works the distribution of gasoline taxes throughout the state to the counties. It's a good meeting. Franklin County, as it has been for a number of years, is fully in compliance. Our spending line for our projects and funds that have been provided to us looks good. Looks very good relative to some of the other counties that haven't executed their funds. There will be new monies coming available that were unanticipated, and Craig, you can expect a call for projects probably very early in 2024, like as early as maybe January, with responses due in March, with funding decisions later that year. So that's not something I normally would notice or talk about publicly, but I've decided it's good for the public to know how these funds sometimes free up, and the ability and the staffing that you have, and having enough staffing to be able to respond to no notice or short notice chunks of money that come available. So, you know, heads up, it's coming your way. Met yesterday with the Wasatch staff and the LSC leadership, myself and my co-chair for the LSC body, finishing up the agenda for 2024's legislative session. As I reported previously, the LSC body voted not to have a formal agenda, so instead we've updated and expanded the number of policy statements and policy positions that the State Association of Counties has on various issues impacting counties now. And I think you're already aware of the pending litigation over funding for public defense. Obviously, there are a number of other legislative issues, but I think that covers it for now. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So last week had the Benton Franklin Board of Health recruitment meeting to fill the administrator position for the Ben Franklin Health Board. So we'll be getting that process going as we are looking for a new administrator for the health board. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, last week was our budget meetings all week long, and again, I want to thank Commissioner Mullen for making himself available on the phone, so we had a quorum we didn't waste the taxpayers' money on assembling everybody for those budget meetings on Monday, and we got the work done. Yesterday, I had the Ben Franklin Workforce Development meeting with the executive and the regular board, and then last year, we had a resolution. It was 2022-286, and this was for the lighting up of the courthouse for the veterans. And I would ask my fellow commissioners to join with me in a consensus of continuing this resolution that we had last year and light up the courthouse for our veterans who have bestowed upon us the liberties and freedoms that we enjoy today. And if I can get a consensus, we'll get Jennifer from the from the maintenance to light this courthouse up again for our veterans.
I'm in agreement to show respect for our veterans to light the courthouse, yes.
Well, as the only veteran sitting up here, I guess I'm in support too. Thanks.
Excellent. All right, he takes us down to administration office, elected department head business. Any elected or department heads that want to come forward?
Yeah, if you've been reading my reports, you've been seeing HB 1181, HB 1181, House Bill 1181. What that is a new legislation where we are going to have to accommodate for greenhouse gas and climate-related resiliency into our comprehensive plan. To that note, the state has sent us a letter in September notifying us that up to $800,000 would be available to us for this effort. Those applications were due yesterday. That $800,000 is not a lump sum. It's going to be doled out over a couple cycles. So our comprehensive plan is due in June of '26. That money will help fund the implementation of these new elements in the comprehensive plan. On the 18th or the 25th, I will be bringing a letter for signature by the board. Now, what we've done is we're basically on the list. We've put in our scope of work, our budget, and things like that. Commerce will then prepare a contract, and I will, I will bring you the letter. If the deal's acceptable to the board, the chair would sign it, then we would submit that in. Eventually, Commerce would come back to us as we got into our actual funding cycle, which will be in 24-25, and they'll submit a contract similar to what we went through with the Shoreline Master Program. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that these things are starting to move along. Another item that we're really starting to push, and the first workshop, it's not the first, but it's the first on this reawakening of the zoning code. That will be on the 14th. It will be workshopping with Planning Commission. That's a legislative item. It's not quasi-judicial. So we're doing a pretty big number of changes to the zoning code, kind of bringing it up. The last full update was in '08, so it's a little out of date. We're bringing that up. Then we'll be continuing to work on the zoning code as well, but that'll be coming in the future, probably in February or March to the board. We'll start workshopping that with you guys.
So, Derek, question. What are the new elements? What are these elements that we got to adhere to?
So resiliency isn't that big of a deal. I mean, we already kind of do that. So what we'll be doing is we'll be going through our stuff. So the Shoreline Master Program that provides resiliency, floodplain management. Again, it's resiliency. It's
I'm talking about the 800,000 we're going to get.
Oh,
The new elements. What are the new elements that we got to adhere to? Take this.
that's what I'm explaining.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So what we'll be doing is we'll be going through our plans, finding out where we already have stuff. A lot of times we already have some resiliency factors that are in our code. They're just not explicitly called out as such. The Shoreline Master Program is one of the biggest ones. Our critical areas ordinances also have that. There's various other things. So resiliency is not a big deal. Greenhouse gas is a little bit more obtuse. It's a little bit more amorphous as to how that is, but there's guides and things like that that have been put together, models and various elements that we can utilize to try to get a baseline. And the idea is, regarding greenhouse gases, is that we're seeking to establish our baseline, our local baseline, and then implement strategies to try to reduce those. We're already doing some of them. We've got the dairy digester recapture projects, well, those types of activities, maybe, and then modifying our regulations to maybe make those types of facilities easier to implement, streamline the permitting, but whatever. That's what we'll be working on, is coming up with these different strategies. Big one they want is VMT reduction, vehicle miles traveled. Due to the layout and the current situation with the county, that's very hard to do, because if you're up north and you need something, you got to drive south. I mean, I guess we could put gondolas in the canals, but I don't think that's really going to work. So, it's things like that, trying to figure it out. It is new, and it will continue to develop. In fact, last week, I was in Olympia doing the first presentation on the resiliency factor of this for the Wasatch Planning 101. So now I know that one really well. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. These things are coming. I'm going to try to keep you a little bit more apprised of things coming as they're rolling along. So thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Derek? Any other department heads or electeds? Seeing nobody coming forward. Administration office business, Annie?
No, sir.
And we got one executive session?
We actually have a couple. The first one is an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1, section 1, subsection I. And this is to discuss with legal counsel matters relating to agency enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation. This should be about 10 minutes.
Okay. So at this time, we'll recess into executive session.
I think the commission should also approve Harris White Leisure being present during that.
Okay, yes, and this will involve Harris White Leisure, the management company
We approve.
of the Happel Center.
Or I approve. Consensus of the board needs to be?
I'd want to hear briefly and publicly what the nexus is. This county, as you have heard me say in the past, is the only one that's ever suffered a court order to publicly reveal our executive session content, because
Right.
we failed to have this conversation.
And the reason why we would include them in the exec session is that they are the current contractor out the Hapo Center. They have information regarding the claim and have been in talks in terms of negotiating a resolution of that.
Okay, so their ability to contribute to our reduced liability.
Correct.
Thank you.
We have come out of executive session. We need to extend for another 10 minutes under the same RCW. At this time, we'll recess to executive session.
Yeah, I think you're right, Commissioner. In a perfect world, we would have immediately submitted a demand letter to the insurance company within a couple weeks of the date of loss. Because there are insurance provisions that if you don't make a claim on your insurance within 90 days under some policies, then you can't make a claim. So there's contractual reasons to do so, but at this point, it's been going on, I think, Mr. Leisure said since March, is that right?
It's been, yeah.
We've come out of executive session. We're going back into executive session for We'll come out, and then we got to go into another executive session, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll wait till we
okay.
get back to regular session.
We need,
Thank you, Shirley.
I think we need some direction.
We are out of executive session, back to regular session, and I believe we have another executive session, Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, sir. We have a closed session. This is RCW 42.30.140, Section 4 for contract negotiations, and we'll give it 5 minutes.
Okay.
Margot, is Margot not out there? She's, okay, yeah. It's okay.
Okay, and at this time, we'll go into closed session.
let me just, it's there.
Go ahead and open the door. We are out of closed session, back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county?
No, sir, we are finished.
Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.